Zabu is the brand new Battle Pass card coming to Marvel Snap on Tuesday, the 3rd of January. In this guide, we have the best decks for Zabu that I've built myself. I have a reputation for being a creative, competitive deck builder, so they're going to be of the highest quality. We have some of the best combo cards of Zabu, but also I've included some of the best counter cards and counter decks to this menace, because I do think this is a very strong Battle Pass card. We've already seen Silver Surfer take over the meta, and I would expect Zabu to be doing similar things. That brings in the question, is Marvel Snap becoming a pay-to-win game when you have cards which you can only receive by paying, and if they're dominating the meta, it is a bit of a slippery slope. Let me know what you think in the comments down below about that. It has an ongoing ability of your 4 cost cards costing 2 less. You can play it on turn 3 as it's 3 energy and 2 stats, and currently in Marvel Snap there's no ramp cards which are going to allow you to play Zabu any earlier than turn 3. Psylocke is a turn 2 card, and she would give you 4 energy. She's not helping you to get that 3 energy a turn sooner. So the earliest you can play Zabu is on turn number 3. What that means then, on turn 4, you're going to be able to play 2 4-cost cards, as they're going to cost 2 each. On turn 5, you're going to be able to play 2 4-cost cards and a 1-cost card, or you're going to be able to play 1 4-cost card and a 3-cost card. Finally, on turn 6, you're going to be able to play 3 4-cost cards. So particularly turn 4 and turn 6 with Zabu, you are really getting to use your energy very efficiently indeed. Here are all of the cards that cost 4 energy currently in Marvel Snap. We've got some pull 4 cards in here, pull 5 card in Darkhawk, some pull 1 cards. What you will notice though, honestly, the pull 1 cards, even the pull 2 cards, not that strong. In pull 2, you get access to Jubilee and Warpath, which can be pretty decent, but honestly, a lot of the best cards you're going to be wanting to use in this, which we're going to be taking a look at soon, are pull 3 cards. That is also a problem because I do think if you're a pull 2 player, your best bet is probably playing these counter Zabu decks rather than the card itself. But I have still got all the options for you later on in the video. Let's look at the synergy cards with Zabu which don't cost 4, because there's quite a few very, very important ones which you're going to want to put into your deck. First of all, Goose, and this is an opportunity for me to showcase my Goose variant that I have. Nobody can play cards that cost 4, 5, or 6 at this location. Why on earth would you want to play this if you're playing a Zabu deck with a bunch of 4-cost cards? Well, Zabu's going to reduce their cost to 2, and Goose changed recently where you are now allowed to play cards which cost 2 or artificially into the Goose lane. So for example, at the moment, if Death costs nothing, you can play Death into the Goose lane. So Goose is going to be a really nice card to lock your opponent out of a location, at least playing their big expensive cards, whereas you're going to be able to play a whole bunch of cards in there, no problem at all. So Goose, definitely a great card. It's also a 2 energy card, which is going to be one of the best cards you can play before your Zabu on turn 3. Mystique, on reveal, if the last card you played has an ongoing ability, this card gains it. So in theory, you could play Zabu on turn 3, and then on turn 4, you could play Mystique, meaning that all your 4 energy cards are going to cost just 1 energy for the rest of the game. Similarly to that, we have Sarah, who has an ongoing ability that cards in your hand cost 1 less. So if you play Sarah on turn number 5, on turn 6, you're going to be able to play 6 4 energy cards on your final turn, because they're all going to cost 1. They're going to be costing 2 from Zabu, and then Sarah's going to reduce them to 1. Pretty insane. I'm sure you can agree. Wave, again, very powerful with Zabu. Next turn, cards in both players' hands cost 4. So on turn 5, you can play a 4-cost card, which is going to be reduced to 2 because of Zabu, and you can play Wave, bringing you up to 5 energy for that turn. And then on turn 6, your opponent's just going to be able to play 1 card. Meanwhile, you're going to be able to play 3 of your 4 energy cards, because Wave's going to set them all to 4, but Zabu's reducing them by 2, meaning you're going to be able to play 3 4-cost cards. Also worth mentioning, your opponent won't be able to play into the Goose lane at all, whereas you'll be able to sneak as many cards as you want into that Goose lane. So I think Wave and Goose are very powerful cards in Zabu decks. America Chavez, I've done some maths on. I always want to consider America Chavez in my deck. She's my favorite card in the game. She's going to increase the odds of you drawing your Zabu on turn 3. If you just imagine this card playing on turn 4, you're missing out on that magical turn of playing 2 4-cost cards on turn 4. But I've done the maths, and here are the numbers on Chavez. Without Chavez, on turn 0, before the first cards you draw 3 cards. So you're seeing 3 out of a possible 12 cards, which means you're seeing 25% of your deck, so there's a 25% chance you see your Zabu. Most importantly, by the time you get to turn 3, you will have drawn 6 cards, which means you have a 50% chance of drawing Zabu. If you put Chavez in your deck, however, you're essentially turning your deck until turn number 5 into an 11 card deck. So by turn 3, you're going to have seen 6 out of a possible 11 cards, which means you're going to be seeing Zabu on turn 3 54.5% of the time. What that means is Chavez is going to get you Zabu on curve about 4% more often, which works out at just over 1 in 25 games, because it is slightly more than 4%. It's about 4.5%. So just over 1 in 25 games, Chavez, by including her in your deck, is going to draw you Zabu on turn 3. It's definitely worth mentioning. It's a consideration, but also worth bearing in mind that you're always going to be top decking the Chavez on turn 6, and you probably don't want to be playing her from hand. However, you could also consider playing Dracula, which is a 4-cost card, to maybe eat that Chavez on the final turn and just leaving her in your hand. That could be an idea. I've also mentioned Sunspot. It's probably the only 1-cost card that really appeals to me in the Zabu deck. Not massively a huge fan of it, but a lot of the other 1-cost cards didn't look appealing at all. And also a little bit of a mention to Storm. Storm and Zabu can make some sense. If you miss that Zabu, having a Storm to play on turn 3 can give you an alternative win con, because a lot of the cards that cost 4 are going to be very good into the Storm lane. Cards like Jessica Jones are going to be quite a common fixture in these decks, and I'm sure a lot of you know that Storm plus Jessica Jones is a great combo. So Storm could be included in these decks for those 50% of games where you don't draw your Zabu on turn number 3. You can play Storm and give yourself something else to work towards. Alright, now we've got the staple 4-cost cards, which are going to be in a vast majority of these Zabu decks. Up first, Spider-Man. Wow, I think Spider-Man's going to be utterly insane. One of my favourite cards in the game, alongside America Chavez and Storm. It's probably my highest played card. It's going to cost you 2. What that means is you can play on turn 5, you can play Spider-Man and Wave, for example, and then on the final turn you can play 3 of your 4-cost cards. Your opponent can only play 1. Also, you can combo Spider-Man with Absorbing Man to web up 2 of your opponent's lanes, and if you've got a Goose in the 3rd, it's going to be very, very difficult for your opponent indeed. So Spider-Man just looks like a great inclusion. Being able to play Spider-Man and another card on turn 5 looks pretty nuts. Rescue, also a great card. She's just 9 points. She is a pull 3 card as well. Jessica Jones, also a similar kind of card, but Rescue just that 1 point extra. If you've got her, you're probably going to play her. However, it is worth mentioning Shang-Chi, also going to be a popular card in these decks, and Rescue is in Shang-Chi range, whereas a card like Jessica Jones is not. So maybe that extra power on Rescue proves to be a bad thing and a downside. Shang-Chi, there he is, of course, a 2-cost Shang-Chi. How could you say no? Being able to play Shang-Chi as well as 2 other cards on turn 6 sounds pretty ridiculous. Enchantress is another 4-cost card, and also you can Enchantress your opponent's Zabus to remove its ongoing effect. Absorbing Man, as mentioned, a pull 4 card. I don't currently have this card, but it does have some big synergies. For example, you could play Shang-Chi and then Absorbing Man to get Shang-Chi in 2 lanes. As mentioned on turn 5, Spider-Man, Absorbing Man, webbing up 2 out of a possible 3 lanes sounds utterly ridiculous. Moon Girl I've also included. I don't think she's one of the stronger options, but certainly if you're lacking a lot of these pull 3 4-cost cards, because there is a lot of them, Moon Girl is just going to help you play Zabu if you're a little bit earlier on in the collection level, because she's going to be cheap herself and she's going to be duplicating some other cheap 4-cost cards. Maybe Moon Girl could just prove to be really good in all of these decks. Strong Guy also gets a mention because he is 10 stats for 4 if you can empty your hand. And of course, with a lot of your hand being very cheap, Strong Guy is certainly a card that you can build around and get big value if you build your deck correctly. Definitely worth mentioning though, it's very difficult for me to build an efficient Strong Guy deck without testing it. So I haven't included a Strong Guy deck in this video, but he's certainly a card that you can experiment with, and I'll be experimenting with on my stream when Zabu is released. Up next, we have some of the build around 4-cost cards, which maybe aren't as mid-rangey, but are going to be in more specific decks. We have Wong, first of all, of course, the on-reveal card. Your on-reveal abilities will happen twice at this location. He's going to be nice and cheap, so you can do some nice combos with Wong. Darkhawk, Series 5 card. I have a feeling this is going to be the strongest way to play Zabu. Darkhawk, I think, is already an incredibly strong card. It's another card that I'm still lacking. He's getting +2 power for each card in your opponent's deck. And you can combo him with Rock Slide, which is also a 4 energy card to shuffle 2 rocks into your opponent's deck. Also Mystique, already kind of good with Zabu potentially, so you have a backup Mystique option with Darkhawk. Darkhawk really nice with Storm, which I mentioned you might want to be playing in these Zabu decks. It just seems like a very, very strong way to play Zabu, and I have got a deck list to share with you a little bit later on. Shuri also gets an honorable mention, a Series 5 card. I would imagine she's going to get nerfed. She's not as good as you might think. in this deck, I think, or in Zabu decks, because you're not going to be playing these 5-cost cards like Captain Marvel and Vision and Red Skull, which she synergizes so well with. But all you need to do, even if you just Shuri a Rock Slide, she's already playing for 8 stats for 4, which is pretty much what you're looking for. Also, she does synergize with Wong, of course. Wong being your on-reveal abilities at this location happen twice, and Shuri Wong is pretty filthy, so she had to get a mention. And finally, an honorable mention to the worst purchase I've ever made in my whole life, Super Scroll, who cost me 6,000 tokens. He is going to copy the ongoing effects of all enemy cards. I think it's finally time for Super Scroll to shine, because there's going to be lots of Zabus doing the round, and if I've got a Zabu and my opponent's got a Zabu, suddenly all of my cards are going to be costing just 1 energy, because Super Scroll is going to copy the ongoing ability from Zabu and all other cards that my opponent has. So if they have any other ongoing cards like a Warpath, something like that, my Super Scroll is going to be licking his lips. So finally, Super Scroll actually looks pretty damn good. First up, we've got a Pool 1 Zabu deck, and it looks very weak. This is not something I would advise playing. I put Cable in there and Mantis to try and draw some of our opponent's 4-cost cards. We have White Queen for a little bit of information, Khazar, of course, and we just put the America Shavas in there because this deck is really lacking a lot of good 4-drops. As you can see, Moon Girl in there to get a couple copies of Jessica Jones, perhaps maybe a couple of copies of Enchantress, and White Queen. Not great, to be honest. Moving on to Pool 2, we definitely get access to a few more nice cards. Shang-Chi, Jubilee, Warpath. I don't really love the sound of Warpath, to be completely honest, but he is potentially 9 stats if you leave a location empty. We've also put Storm and Sunspot in there, as we mentioned before. Sunspot, the only real 1-drop, which kind of makes some sense in this deck, I think. And Storm there, in case we miss our Zabu, you're going to be able to go Storm Jessica Jones to secure a location. Up next, we have a Pool 3 generic Zabu, and we do have that Goose Wave. I've just realized, as I'm 12 minutes into this video, this Punisher is not Punisher. This is Zabu. Please forgive me for the mistake there. This is Zabu. The link for this deck will be in the description below with the proper link. He's just a placeholder because he's 3 energy, 2 stats. I made it in-game. Anyway, you've got Goose, you've got Wave, the Shang-Chi, the Spider-Man. Again, though, a lot of the 4 energy cards are not quite as impressive as you might expect. We've got a Drax, Crossbones, Rock Slide, kind of lackluster. So you can definitely see these cards like Darkhawk, Absorbing Man are really going to be boosting the power potential of these decks, because a lot of the 4-drops are kind of bad. Here's the Darkhawk Zabu deck. This is what I believe is going to be the strongest way to play Zabu, and it does have a lot of cards which you're not going to have access to. Just in this deck already, I don't have Darkhawk, I don't have Absorbing Man either, so there's 2 cards in this deck which I don't even have, and I've been spending an insane amount of money on this game, and I've been playing it since May in closed beta. The idea is we're going to Korg on turn 1, Black Widow on turn 2. Both these cards are going to be giving our Darkhawk some extra stats by preventing our opponent drawing cards or adding cards to their deck. We can then on turn 3 either Zabu or Storm, depending on which we have. If we draw the Zabu, we're probably not going to be storming that game. I just like including her as a backup option. Then of course on turn 4 you can start to play your Darkhawk. You can Mystique your Darkhawk to get another one. Also you can have your Wong down there where you can be playing your Korg into that, your Rock Slide into your Wong lane to double down the on-reveal ability. And there's also an Odin there as a finisher, which you can use your Odin on cards like Korg, on cards like the Rock Slide as well, to just be putting even more rocks into your opponent's deck and making your Darkhawk just go through the roof. You can also Spider-Man on turn number 5 and Absorbing Man on turn number 5 to do that dirty little combo. Also Absorbing Man onto Rock Slide, Absorbing Man into Wong. It looks pretty filthy, I'm not going to lie to you guys. Alright, how to counter Zabu? Because that's a big question. First and foremost, the obvious ones. Enchantress is going to remove its ongoing ability. Rogue is going to steal it. That could be very, very spicy indeed if you've got some 4-cost cards of your own. Iceman, a slightly less obvious one. So Iceman, definitely another 1-cost card to consider playing in your Zabu decks alongside Sunspot, because it's giving a random card in your opponent's hand plus 1 cost. And what this might mean is if you make your opponent's Zabu cost 4, that's slowing them down by a whole turn, which is a really, really big deal. Also though, if you don't hit the Zabu, even if you just hit one of the 4-cost cards and make them cost 3, that might just mean that on turn 6, they can only play 2 of those cards instead of 3. Leader. We all know that Leader's quite unpopular and is quite likely to get nerfed, but if you don't want to go down the Zabu route yourself, if you're expecting your opponent to play a whole bunch of cards on the final turn, Leader is going to be a great counter play to that. And my favourite one of all, Sandman. Sandman's proven to be my favourite card in the last month, really. I've been playing him a whole bunch in the last week or two. Ongoing, players can only play one card a turn. You play him down on turn 4, or even better if you can get him down on turn 3 by playing Psylocke on 2, meaning that on turn 3 you're going to have 4 energy. You can play your Sandman. Make sure you snap before you do. You probably want to be snapping before your Psylocke if you have Psylocke into Sandman. And then your opponent's just going to be sat there, having not played many cards early game, holding on to these 4-cost cards, which are going to be very cheap in the hand, but they can only play one of them per turn. So Sandman, while Sandman is not good himself in Zabu decks, he is great at countering it. So I think this is going to be the month of the Sandman. Here is my Sandman Shuri list. This is very refined. I've been playing a whole bunch with it. Now, don't panic if you don't have Shuri. You can still play this deck. You're going to want to replace Shuri with another generic 4-drop card. Probably Jessica Jones would be my recommendation. You therefore also might want to be replacing Taskmaster for maybe an Arnim Zola or any card of your choice. I think Vision is also a really great option in this deck. But the idea of this one is you Ebony Maw on turn 1, Psylocke on turn 2, meaning you can play Sandman on turn number 3. Excuse me. On turn 4, you play Shuri, and then on turn 5, you play Red Skull for 30 points, and then you can Taskmaster it for another 30 points. You can also be playing Doctor Doom and Captain Marvel after you've played Sandman, which are very, very good cards indeed, because your opponent can only play a card into each lane, whereas you're distributing points across all 3 lanes. Vision, a very good consideration for this deck. Leader as well. America Chavez, I would not replace. She's in there because she's increasing the odds of you drawing Psylocke on 2, Sandman on 4. Also, Lizard, Mr. Fantastic, and Maximus are just in there to give us an early curve. One way you can really suffer with Sandman decks is if you don't have an early game and you miss a turn 2 or a turn 3, you're sort of playing catch up, and that is going to be definitely something you want to avoid doing. Arnim Zola also definitely worth a mention in this one. Arnim Zola can be great with the Shuri package for sure. I just ended up cutting him to have a little bit of an early curve. Another counter card potentially is that of Daredevil. He is on turn 5 showing you where your opponent's playing. So you could go for a location lockdown type deck with a Storm, and then if your opponent's trying to Spider-Man you on turn 5, for example, you're going to see where they're going to be Spider-Manning you, so you can commit a bunch of stats there and maybe use a Spider-Man of your own to counteract that. So that is the full guide on Zabu. A bunch of decks, all in the description, a bunch of counter plays, a bunch of combo cards. I do hope you enjoyed it. Like it if you did. Comment down below what you think of Zabu, and do you think that this is turning into a pay-to-win game with these very strong Battle Pass cards? Furthermore, I would be very interested in hearing your thoughts on the interactions with cards like Wave are going to be having with Zabu and Serra. Do you think that this is just going to be too strong? Because being able to hold all your plays until turn 6 is a very, very strong thing to do in Marvel Snap, because you can just wait to see where your opponent's played, and then you can just slam a bunch of cards yourself. Probably another card worth mentioning that could work in this package as well is playing Magic. She is a 5 energy 3 stat card, which gives turns one of the locations to Limbo, because you could play Magic on 5, Serra on 6, and then on turn 7 you could play flipping 7 4-cost cards in just whichever location is going to help you win. Does sound rather filthy. So let me know what you think about all those things. Thanks again so much for watching. If you have watched this far, the keyword in the chat is goosed. Get goosed. That's how I know you watched the whole video. Appreciate the support. See you soon.